we all had nothing to lose at this point. And that was Rudy Ponco, who plays JJ in the show. We lived together the whole first season. I slept on blankets in an apartment that we had. But like, we made a pact. We made a pact that anytime we had scenes together, that was what we would tell each other. Nothing to lose, nothing to lose. And I think that just stuck. I think it just stuck. I think it was just enough of this beautiful opportunity and the lack of concern for the reaction and just being present that gave us this like little bit of freedom.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Chase Stokes is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you get a new character? Like, is there a typical road you go down to kind of wrap your arms around this new person?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the typical first step?
You know, I call it the newspaper read. And it's sort of like going through the Sunday comics. You just read to read. Mm-hmm. And I think as an artist, we get so excited, especially early in your career, just at the idea of having a character to craft. And if we can take ourselves out of that, and me in particular, and just read for the joy of reading again, it subconsciously gets me more connected to the character. And then ideas start flowing, and I'll sit with usually like a notepad and a pen, and I'll just scribble. I mean, I look insane when I go through my first pass of a script. And it's just random thoughts and concepts or what ifs. And I just allow myself to read for pleasure. And then I'll go in after one or two reads, and then I'll start looking at the character. I suffer from a number of concussions, so I have an issue with memory retention, which as an actor is probably one of the scariest things you could navigate. So for me, it's just repetition. It's just repetition of finding the heartbeat to that character. Who is he? What does he sound like? What does he walk like? What does he talk like? And just allowing myself the freedom to not get overly invested too soon. And I like to think about it kind of from a musical perspective. I think musicians, when they're making their music, it's every minute detail from the very beginning. It's, how does this sound? Does this go? Does this verse make sense with the second verse? Does the chorus transition well? Mm-hmm. And you almost get overly consumed to the point to where when you mix and master a song, you've heard it so many times that you're sick of it. Yes. And so for me, I try not to get in that headspace. I try to look at it from the outside in as long as humanly possible till I have to. And that usually helps me find that roadmap of the character.
This feels like it's so important, and it's coming up a lot lately. And I'm really impressed with people who are young like you have this already, which is this idea of not panicking about how to do this yet. Sure. And be able to be like, I'm not going to take an approach here yet. I'm actually going to actively stop myself from making this easy right now, because you know the benefit of that already. Mm-hmm.
I think that comes from years of failure. I think that comes from years of getting sides and standing next to a blank wall and pretending as if there is a dragon behind me and creating a whole world in my head and failing at it so many times. Mm-hmm. And at some point you just realize that it's not working, that the overthought and the overconsumption just gets you too far down the road too soon. Yeah. And I spent so much, I've been auditioning since I was really a senior in high school in Orlando. And I didn't have friends in the industry. I didn't even know what a self-tape was at the time. And so it was really trial by fire. And it wasn't until I started to take the craft seriously that I was able to then find that disassociation from all of that. And until you get into the work, it's really easy to overthink everything in that space.
Yes. What made you, as a senior, even want to go into this?
It's funny you ask. So I grew up playing ice hockey. My stepdad was kind of a hometown hero in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so when my mother got remarried, he sort of passed on that love for the sport. And I played competitively through high school. I mean, I traveled from Florida all the way through the Midwest. I would go up to here to New York, all over the place. And it was my only love. I sucked at school. I had terrible grades. And I was very undersized. I was 15, 16 playing with 19, 20, 21-year-old kids and major juniors and just getting absolutely demolished. And so I think it was 8 concussions and a partially torn rotator cuff later, I was kind of forced with this roadmap of giving it up. And at the time, because I was traveling so much, I was taking TV production in the morning because it was kind of an easy grade. It was my teacher was a hockey fan. He was from Michigan, so he let me sleep in. But I always loved film and TV, so I was behind the camera. So I was producing the morning news segment. And there was a morning where one of the girls was sick, who was our anchor. And he was like, you know the run of the show, you got to do it. And I'm like, oh, shit. Okay, I'm going to sweat my ass off and I'm going to be panicked. But the only thing I knew what to do was to make a fool of myself. And I did. And he said, you should really think about this acting thing. And that same girl had a younger brother who played lacrosse at our high school and was the most gorgeous human being you would ever see in your entire life. And he got sick, ironically, that Christmas. And they used to do the Disney catalogs. And that was how they paid for their vacations. And she asked, she said, hey, will you fill in for my brother Jake? And I said, yeah, do I get like free Disney tickets or something? Because I didn't, we didn't have money to do all of those things. And so I did it and I made like $400 and I got a free Disney pass and I thought it was the coolest thing. And I started down the path of just making short films and commercials for our news segments. And I fell in love with the process. I fell in love. I found an improv class. I got into that. There was an acting coach in Orlando. It was a guy who had like 6 lines in The Patriot. And he created this whole acting school there. And I don't know how great it was, but it was something. And I just went head first into a 3-foot pool of learning as much as I could, as quick as I could. And as time progressed, I realized that I had to go to where it was. And I didn't know how to get there. I didn't have the funds to do it. So I made a fake Gmail account pretending to be a manager. And I went on IMDb Pro. And I emailed every agent at CAA, WME, ICM at the time, UTA, Gersh, you name it. And a guy at APA responded and said, yeah, I want to talk to him on the phone. And I got on the phone with him a week later and I folded immediately. I was like, I'm a liar. I'm a piece of shit. I've been, emailing you as a manager. It's me. Please just give me a shot. And he just got a kick out of it. And he gave me a shot and started sending me self-tapes. And that's where the journey kind of began. And I had to transition from hockey because of those injuries. And I had to find a new obsession. And for me, that obsession was filmmaking.
And it's so funny that you folded because it was probably the right thing to do. If you went down a little bit further and played this person, you may have really gotten mad at this.
Oh, it could have ended in flames. I'm not good at taking no for an answer. I never have. So for me, there wasn't another option. It was this is the route I'm going to go. This is the opening, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, I'll find another way.
And taking a step into that larger world of actually kind of, like you did, you kind of like pushed your foot into the door that was not open yet.
I don't even think it was cracked. It was dead bolted and double locked.
God bless, But what was the awakening of that? Was there an awakening of like the idea of this business now that you went into there? Or simply this idea of auditioning that you now had to deal with?
Well, at the time, he was sending me self-tapes, and I learned the hardest way of what a self-tape was. I didn't know how to do it. I ended up getting some buddies from TV production to film a legitimate scene in the woods. I literally built out the world, like directed, produced, edited it, the whole 9 yards, and I sent it to him, and he was like, what the fuck is this? But that
that's probably better than my early short films, though.
I didn't know what to do. Like, I was shooting coverage. I had a co-star. Like, it was bananas. I knew
I've
that
never heard of anything like
I
this.
knew that there wasn't an opportunity, even if I didn't know what I was doing. I knew enough about filmmaking by that point to know how to shoot something.
Yeah.
So I just committed to the idea of saying, I don't know if this is right. And also in my head, I remember at the time, I'm like, how do actors have the time to do this for so many auditions? And then very shortly realized, like, hey man, you just need a blank wall and a non-conflicting t-shirt and you're good. And also you just need a reader off camera and don't look down the barrel. And I was like, cool.
And then they're like, Chase, this is amazing. You didn't get the part, but they want to hire you as the cameraman.
Yeah, they're running a second unit and they need a C camera operator. So, if you're in, or pull focus, I don't know, all of it worked. So
I'm serious though. It's better than a lot of short films that are in festivals. I guarantee
I
you.
don't know where it is and I don't want to know where it is. But it was a learning experience.
I just love this story so much. I love the idea when people don't know, but the idea when somebody goes the full 9.
Yes.
Without knowing. So then you find out how to do this. Mm-hmm. Did you crack the audition code? You know what I mean? Early, meaning about how to do this and how to get seen and.
No. I mean. It was rough because I needed to know, which was a huge lesson for me. Can I do this?
Yeah.
Does the casting director believe me?
Yeah.
Is the producer even seeing it? Is the assistant who I'm sending the email to even letting the agent watch the audition to know whether or not it's sending? I didn't know for the first couple of months. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have the courage to ask. Mm-hmm. I am inherently a super insecure person. Mm. Like very, very insecure. Mm. And I just finally, I picked up the phone and I said, has he ever watched any of these tapes? Mm-hmm. And he said, I think so. And I'm sending them to the casting associate. And I'm like, okay, associate to an assistant to the casting director. So there's 3 steps there to even get a form of maybe we'll send this to a director or a producer. Right. And then there was a point where after that had been going on and I'd probably done about 100 auditions at this time, I had this weird epiphany of saying, how do I get their attention? How do I do something, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, that just provokes a response? Mm-hmm. And I did a whole audition screaming. Didn't call for it. Was not one of those scenes. And I got a call from the agent at the time. And he said, you need to pack your bags and you need to get in your car and you need to come to LA.
I love this.
And I was like, okay. I was doing to-go at Chili's. I was wiping benches at a gym. I was at a community college. And I decided to go. I got in the car and I went and I stayed at my agent's house on his couch. And he said, you need to get in class. You need to learn the craft. You need to understand this. And so I fortunately got in with an incredible coach. Her name is Lee Kilton Smith. She's worked with so many great actors. And I walked in the room and was immediately overwhelmed. It was a tiny little theater in North Hollywood in the Arts District, and it made me realize how much I had learned in like the improv space, and with this acting coach in Orlando, and how much more of the craft I needed to know. And I was surrounded by working actors. I was probably one of maybe 4 people in this class that was not either on a show, on a movie I had watched and admired, or was working their way up from a project that had happened in the past that they're now trying to transition out of. And I just sunk my teeth in. And I failed and I failed and I failed. And
Wait, let me pause you.
Sure.
Pause right there. When you were failing,
Mm-hmm.
something didn't tell you it's time to go back home,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
What was that? Was that just simply a love of the idea of acting,
Mm-hmm.
a small belief in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
or the idea of there's nothing else that I know how to do right now?
I think it was sort of a witch's brew of all of that. I kind of, like I said earlier, I'm not good at taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
And playing hockey or any competitive sport at that level, the small wins are the best wins. It's the way that you pivot as you're crossing your feet over to transition from forward skating to backward skating. It's the way that you feel the puck leave your stick and feeling the difference when you make that adjustment in your hand position. And I was getting those small wins. I was failing. I was on a team that lost 26 games that season. But we had a couple losses that were like 2-1 or 3-2, and they were close games. In my brain, that's what I kept telling myself, is you're growing. Not at the rate as every class when somebody comes in and they book a job and everybody cheers for them type of growing.
Right.
But you're growing. And
and were people telling you this too? Or, you know what I mean? Or were you just feeling this?
There was two kids that I still to this day stay in touch with. And one of them I ended up getting out of the house that I was living in and staying at his house for a while, who were scene partners, but also knew that I came out there with like $1,000 and could barely afford to live. So they would buy me lunch after class and whatnot. They would give me a little bit of like, hey man, like that was great. Or hey, good work today. Yeah. And it was just enough of that positive reinforcement.
You need it though.
to kind of keep the wheels turning. And it wasn't the full stint. I mean, I went back and I finished college and I would go back and forth from LA and self-tape. It was kind of a promise to my grandmother to finish school. And it was a weird metaphor that I didn't understand at the time that has serviced me in this career so much. I like I told you, I was terrible at school, terrible. But she said, hey, if you finish a task, an extended task that you may not necessarily love, and you get that win, imagine the amount of effort you'll put into with the things that you love.
That's a good one.
And it's been something I've kept in my back pocket since she told me that.
That's a good one. So what was the turning point where you started the book? Or maybe even, let's say this, a turning point where you were starting to get noticed?
Sure. So I'd been working with Lee, and I went back to Florida to go finish school. My grandmother also got sick. And I was understanding the value of a self-tape at this point. Do the work. Don't overthink it, and getting into that flow of, I was auditioning enough to understand that if you put too much value or too much stake into one thing, you're losing the opportunity to be free. And I got this audition, and it was for a TV series, and I felt really confident about it, and I got the call that they wanted to bring me out to LA. And they wanted me to read with the director. And I remember thinking, oh shit, somebody saw something in me in that moment that maybe that's where I need to go. That's the direction. Whatever I did in that tape, so I watched it back and watched it back and watched it back. And I had also, at the time, it was when they were doing the Han Solo film. And I got the call right when I landed in LA. They were like, hey, they love you. Like, the producers want to see you. And I was like, holy shit, what is happening? I think I'm tapping into something. So I did the same thing. I went back and watched that tape and watched it. And I read with the director for this TV series that I was like getting sent to the network to see if the network would approve of me. And then at the same time, I'm like heavy in the mix with this group of actors that I've watched for years and seen them have success. And there's me in this space for young Harrison Ford, who's an idol of mine. And I didn't get either of them, but it was enough for me to say, okay, I think I'm on the right track. And shortly after that, I got a read for this show called Montauk, and I read for it, and they said, hey, we want to bring you to Atlanta to meet with Netflix and all these people. And it was Stranger Things. And so I went in and I read as Jonathan Byers. And they said, probably not right, but we do have this other part for you. And I went back to Florida. Mind you, it's an 8-hour drive from Atlanta to Orlando. And I drove back that night, put myself on tape again, sent it back to the producers. And they called me 48 hours later and they said, hey, we need you back in Atlanta. They want you to read for this. Mind you, I'm a full-time student. I have no money. I'm working 2 jobs trying to figure this out, lying to both of my jobs about getting sick all the time to try to get time off to go do this. And I drove back up.
Oh, God.
I slept in an empty parking lot outside of Screen Gems in Atlanta. And I went in the next morning and I couldn't say a single line.
Paralyzed?
Paralyzed.
With fear? Or
I think because I thought they liked me for the other part, I wasn't able to commit to the idea that maybe wrong part, right project type of situation. And I froze and I walked out, and I'll never forget it. Matt and Ross patted me on the back and said, hey man, it's okay. And I said, no, it's not. No, it's not. And I sat in my car in that parking lot in Screen Gems and I just cried. And I said, I don't know if I can do this. If I can't go into a room with the people that are going to be there every single day and do the work, how is this a tangible thing? And I called my agent at the time. I said, get me back in. Get me back in. Get me back in before I drive 8 hours back to Florida. Please, I will do anything. I'll sit out front and do push-ups till I pass out. Like, I don't know. Like, I'll scream, you know.
So wait, but what was the transition from I can't do this to doing the radical thing of calling your agent saying, get me back in? I guess when you look at it, it's not that far away, right? Because you're at the bottom.
Yeah.
And you just like, I'm just going to do this insane thing.
I think
because there's nothing else to do.
Yeah. Like a little bit of fight or flight, a little bit of, I was embarrassed, truthfully. I was so embarrassed because I was so prepared and I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I think going back to earlier, I overthought it.
Yeah.
I had created a whole world in my head where there didn't need to be a world yet.
Yeah.
And I think I was just so frustrated and so embarrassed that I was ready to throw it all out and just say, fuck it.
Yeah.
And that's been like a term that lives so deeply in my gut as an artist now, of just fuck it.
Yeah.
And throw it away.
Yeah.
You do the prep, you do the work, you know the material, you know the choices you want to make. You have to.
Yeah.
You have to just fuck it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get back in.
Oh.
So I got in my car, no music, nothing, and drove 8 hours straight. Went to class the next day.
Oh.
I don't think I spoke for 48 hours. And lo and behold, some time passes and I get a call and they said, hey, they're doing a table read for that show. It's now called Stranger Things. They want you to come read for Steve. They haven't filled in the role, or I'm sorry, for Jonathan Byers. The kid's coming from the UK. His contract hasn't signed. They just need somebody. Got in my car and drove. And I was at the Georgian Terrace Hotel. I slept in the parking lot for the nights that I was there. I didn't even ask for a room because I was like, I'm a local hire. Yeah, I'll do it, whatever. Yeah. And I did it. And I remember leaving and Ross and Matt came up to me and they said, hey, thanks for doing that. I'm like, we'll find something for you. And I was like, great. Just had already been in LA enough time and had done enough of the auditions to know that empty promises were a thing in this industry.
Yeah.
And I got in my car, I drove off, went back to real life, and 2 months later they called me and they said, hey, Matt and Ross wrote you a small little part and want you to come up and do this thing. And that was my first job.
Amazing.
And it was a product of failing forwards.
Right.
Falling in the right direction and just continuing to keep on keeping on.
Perseverance and
a lot of gas money. A lot of gas money.
there are people with a lot of talent that take that 8-hour drive and they don't ever answer the phone again.
Yeah.
If it ever rings. I mean,
Right.
But they don't, and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's the sad part of this. You have to stay in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost depressing though that it has to be like that.
Sure. It is. It's.
I mean,
I think if you were to take 10 actors and actresses and line them up and say, like, how much time have you spent questioning your career choice?
yeah.
And leaving or spending time feeling very unfulfilled?
Yeah.
I think you'd probably get 10 hands up.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of the creative journey. I mean, you look at Basquiat, who spent his whole life creating art. And not until after he passed did people really respect his work.
Yeah.
And it's a lonely journey at times, but it can also be the polar opposite of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the duality of life, right? It's not just art, it's human experience.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, I mean, we create these projects, TV, film, theater, and it's all about the human experience. It's that connection.
Yes.
And you have to have both sides of the coin in order for it to resonate.
Yes.
And you have to experience it too. You can't fake it.
Right.
And so even though those things happened in the moment and other things in my journey in LA, in the heat of it, you're always like, why? Why did I see 6 people and 6 friends book this series or book this movie and life changed this and whatever have you? And why am I $40,000 in debt with an eviction notice on my door still pursuing this? At the time, I didn't understand it. Now, I would have it no other way. No other way.
Mm-hmm. When I first saw you, episode 1 in Outer Banks, I'm seeing a person who it feels like is in command of their character, a person who is captivating to watch, all the things you want from a person helming a show, and yet breathing life into this character, living authentic life. Tell me, from that first job to the filming of that, was there a journey in the work in there about how to do this, and is that where the true growth happened there when you actually started working?
Yeah. I mean, after Stranger Things, I started to get jobs here and there. I had a couple kind of interesting ones after that have lived and died, and thankfully. But I made the choice after I'd done, I think it was a Hallmark movie. I'd worked with like some really cool people, Annie McDowell, Minka Kelly, and I watched them work.
Mm-hmm.
I watched them and I was fascinated. I was like, it didn't make sense to me how their artist brain worked. And then I realized when I went down their list on IMDb, I was like, oh, they're seasoned. Mm-hmm. And I just took that and I remember thinking, I need to make a choice here on being strategic with what I want to do. If I look at the people that I admire, it's not going to be an easy road, but I know that there's a roadmap to follow. And I fortunately really only did projects with people that I was terrified of or admired or knew their career. And that really allowed me like 2% of comfortability in going into playing John B. Because I'd seen enough of it, of seasoned actors and actresses, that really allowed me to say, okay, I've had conversations with them. They're humans. They've done this. They've led things. They've done it for decades. I think I've taken a nugget of information from these people that is allowing me the opportunity to believe that I can do that. But I had also, by that point, I had this idea early on, like maybe I'll be the one who gets the leading role, like right off the bat, and I have this flourishing career, and I'm in that space. And it wasn't that. Like I was an extra in Taika Waititi's reboot of The In-Betweeners on MTV. That was one of my first jobs as a working actor. And then I got the co-star, and then I got the recurring co-star, and then I was a guest star, and then I was a recurring guest star, and then I booked a fractional series regular, and then supporting leads in independent films. And not many people know that. It's just the show that is, you know, came out during the pandemic. And so I had the opportunity to really see it from every level and understand the process a bit more in depth. So by the time this idea of what everybody, you know, wants, which is to do some long form work in their career, I'd had enough experience of watching and learning and growing in the environment to then have a tiny bit of comfortability. But it was still the most daunting task of my life. And I also got the job and was on set shooting the first scene across from Adina Porter, who is a monster. On my first day, I got the job, and under 2 weeks, I was rolling cameras. They had I was the last one to get the job. They had the entire cast built out. They had prepped basically the first 5 episodes, and they didn't have their lead actor.
Wow.
So there was a lot of weight for sure going into that.
And you felt that. You felt that weight.
Yes. Yeah, immediately. I mean, I had asked, because the story of getting the job was bananas, but I had asked because I really only brought a suitcase with like 2 pairs of boxers and some shorts and 2 t-shirts. I was like, hey, can I go and get my stuff? And they're like, can't leave. We got to go. You have boating lessons at 10 a.m. You have swim training at noon. You have like script reviews and run-throughs at 3. And that was like the whole week leading into it.
Wow.
So I was wearing our wardrobe department. Get this shit. We had a dinner 2 nights after I had booked the job with all the execs from Netflix. They flew into Charleston. I didn't have any clothes to wear.
Wow.
So Jonas, who's the creator of the show, he said, go to the wardrobe department. Emmy will give you some stuff. I showed up to one of the fanciest restaurants in Charleston wearing a cut-off, button-down Charleston County jail shirt and jeans that were 4 sizes too big and flip-flops that I ended up wearing in the show. And Netflix is looking at me like, oh boy.
They're like, wait, that's style.
They're like,
that's modern, baby.
is that his shirt? Did we just pick this kid up? But
Wow.
even that story, like the executives that were in the room for Outer Banks when I did my final network test, the execs that were in the room when I dropped the ball for Stranger Things.
Wow. How about that?
So in that space, it's a little bit of a ramble here, but I think going back to the fuck it and like letting go, which is, I think, imperative as an artist. I saw them and I looked them in the face and I said, I'm not getting this job. I immediately went back to that room at Screen Gems in Atlanta 6 years prior. And I said, I'm not getting this job. And I walked out and I was a wreck. And Jonas came out and he saw me just sobbing in front of the office. And he said, I don't know you yet. Seemed like a really good dude. But this level of vulnerability right here is a guy that I want to lead this show.
Wow.
So whatever you can take from this and go back and do it, he goes, you got my vote.
Wow. And then, how did you deal with this pressure then? With two pairs of boxers?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. So, you know,
because there's a freedom in that first episode. There's a lightness.
Freedom.
There's a I would never think of all of this going on.
You know, I think my first thought when I got there is that they gave me a rental car and I said, I need to go to the house where this kid lives. And I need to just experience it. And Jonah said, I got a better idea. So he sent the entire cast. It's called the Chateau. It's this beautiful property, 280 degrees of water view. He said, hey, I'm gonna send you guys pizzas and like 48 Bud Lights, and you guys just stay the night. Probably the worst, like Netflix, sorry in advance, but like at the time, all of us had never really worked. It was just a bunch of kids who like he was taking a risk on. And he locked us in there and we did some illicit activities and painted and shot slingshots and jammed the music.
And it paid dividends for this show.
And it did. And it was this immediate realization that we had lightning in a bottle that nobody knew about. And we never, that whole first season, thought about the what if and when the show came out. It was the most present, the most bubble-oriented experience ever. I mean, pre-COVID too, which was odd, but
what do you account that to?
We all were coming from different walks of life, but on the same path.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, and I'm rewatching Lost right now, but it's that kind of idea of all of these people getting stuck on this island together and all having some form of similarity on their journey of getting there was kind of the metaphor for the show. We all had nothing to lose at this point. And that was Rudy Ponco, who plays JJ in the show. We lived together the whole first season. I slept on blankets in an apartment that we had. But like, we made a pact. We made a pact that anytime we had scenes together, that was what we would tell each other. Nothing to lose, nothing to lose. And I think that just stuck.
Yeah.
I think it just stuck. I think it was just enough of this beautiful opportunity and the lack of concern for the reaction and just being present that gave us this like little bit of freedom.
Yeah.
But we did know, like we were hyper aware of the fact that it was Netflix in a time where Netflix was king.
Yeah.
And we knew that if we screwed it up,
you can go bye-bye.
It was all of our first time. It was our last first, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it was just the community at the time that allowed us to breathe through it. And it's also a testament to our writers and our directors. Like, it's such a fluid show.
It really feels that way.
It's like doing a play.
You know, yeah. And it you know, I'm a cynical viewer. I'm starting to see finally like bad direction, which is a weird thing to have to explain to my wife or other people I'm watching. I'm like, shows, I'm like, this is, you see how weird this is? Yeah, why is this weird?
They cross
it's
the
bad
line.
direction. And I try to explain this. And then this show comes on, I'm like, this is an example of good direction. This is an example of people, actors being alive in this space. And I don't know what that, and then you're doing things in this show that are hard to do. Yeah. I mean, you're on water quite a bit.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stunts.
Yes.
And all this stuff is usually what it amounts to in bad shows is this stilted quality.
Sure.
Where you can feel it being kind of structured.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a lot of fluidity, like you're talking about. I mean, so is this a directing thing, or is this a thing where like everybody's on the same page about how to do this fast?
Well, I think it's a combination. And Jonas had lived out here. He had lived in LA for forever, and he decided, I'm moving back to North Carolina. I'm done with LA. I've got 2 kids. They're getting to an age to where I want them to have a normal childhood. I'm moving back, and I'm just going to do it my way. And he's a waterman, and there's this beautiful pocket of filmmaking down in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they all are just on the same page. They all ride around in boats. They go surf on Saturday mornings, and it's that, and then there's the filmmaking.
Yeah.
And everybody that is on our show behind the camera has been there since the very beginning. Bo Webb, who is our camera operator, he still operates camera or is a DP for some episodes now. And they just understand how it works.
Yeah.
They grew up on the water. So like the boat scenes, you're not dealing with people who are scared of, what if I fall in? I mean, shit, we've had docks break and operators fall into the water and losing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of camera equipment. But that's part of it's a byproduct of doing it this way. But it really is top down. Yeah. It's really finding the right people who understand that this is a very physically demanding show. I mean, we shoot on Sony Venices, which are school buses on shoulder mounts. It's taxing on everybody, but we've all kind of known from the beginning what we got into. And it's really been a testament of Jonas and his ability to be transparent from the beginning, saying, hey, we're going to shoot on the water and it's going to be hot as shit. And it's going to be difficult at first, but we'll find our footing and we'll go from there. And we just kind of baby stepped into it and it worked.
Yeah.
It just worked.
It has to be done fast because it's television, but it doesn't feel like it's skimped on. And I don't know how to wrap my arms around that.
I mean, it
and
is.
And has this changed in the 3 seasons?
No, I mean, we shoot at an insane pace.
Wow.
It's 3 cameras, it's shoulder mounts. Maybe we used a Steadicam for the first time this season, for season 4. We've used cranes only for like technical pieces that have huge VFX elements to it. I mean, side note, it has become film school for us.
I'm sure.
Like the amount of knowledge and wanting to be behind the camera since a young age, this has been the best experience for me as an artist. But we shoot so fast and we shoot a lot.
Wow.
Like we shoot 5-6 takes on a wide, and then we push in a little bit and we do another 5-6 takes, and then we go into like an exploratory coverage, and then we go into like a version of coverage, and we'll do that in like 5 or 6 different ways. And when you have these huge scenes with 4 to 6 actors, and then you matching coverage in a space like that, there's so much room to play. It's insane.
That's the other thing. There's so many scenes where there's 4 people at least.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it that part.
Yeah. So as a filmmaker, you're doing, advanced math in your head and making sure that your DP and your script supervisor are all like, okay, we have, this going this way, and then we've got this person to this person. Do we have it this way as well? And do we need to, before we flip the world, like what else are we missing?
Yeah.
And then we've added characters, and we've added complexities, and we've added massive set pieces, and we've added all these different elements as time has gone on. So,
and are you still able to do the work that you need to do, even though this has grown? Do you know what I mean? Are you, and does that go for the other actors? Are you feeling that?
I think it's a yes and no.
Yeah.
I think Josh Pate, because Jonas and Josh, they're twins. Josh Pate kind of said it best. When the show came out and it worked, it was the question of, can we sustain it? And his thought, because he's a huge music guy, he said, we got to make the most drastic shift in our music. We got to go from like, songs about Jane Maroon 5 to like Disturbed, and play a record that is going to just rock people's socks and kind of not know what hit them. And so we got really plot heavy, and we got into this treasure hunting element, which I think it's part of the heartbeat of the show. But I think it's also a super heavy character driven show. And I think when you're navigating such an intense plot, and it's only gotten deeper with the historical value and, the elements of the characters being so invested at a young age, you're riding this fine line of not being too plot heavy and, getting too deep into expositional dialogue, and then also making sure that the characters are present.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a fun task. How do you make a character still interesting within a massive world?
Yeah.
And it didn't start that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at this map behind us, and we spent 2.5 months in Morocco filming the end of this season. And in a show that started with a bunch of kids from the wrong side of the track, sort of, a modern version of Romeo and Juliet with the Montagues and the Capulets. Yeah. How do you get to Morocco in 5 years?
Yeah.
And I think you just have to learn to adapt.
Yeah.
And you have to really, Spielberg's always said it best, you got to believe in the magic.
Yeah.
And that's been our thing, as, obviously there's no, magic per se, but you got to buy into it, and you got to really, really commit to it.
It's amazing. Before we have to end, we have to at least talk a little bit about some stuff that's coming up. Like, I know you probably can't talk a lot, but like, whenever I hear the word Cassavetes, of course, I'm a Cassavetes fanatic, okay? And his son made this movie from a popular young adult novel series, right? Called Marked Men. Going in with somebody like that, with the lineage of Cassavetes, right? I mean, were you, I think when I was your age, I wasn't really a Cassavetes person yet. So I will forgive you if before this you didn't know who this person's father was. I'll forgive it.
John and Gina, I think, are one of the most iconic Hollywood couples of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, that family is royalty.
Yeah.
And I am a sucker for love. I am a hopeless romantic at my core. I have, 3 dads and 2 moms, I'm always searching for, that. But Nick, having that and being such a human was unbelievable. And to create his own path with both his mother and his father.
Yeah.
In the ways that he's done it his own way. I mean, God is a Bullet, we watched it while we were filming Marked Men. And I was thinking about the stuff that we had already gotten in the can. I'm like, you just did a film about a cult with some incredible people. And then now you're doing this. Like that is an artist. He is an artist.
Yeah.
And he is one of my favorite people on this planet.
That's amazing.
And that film, for me, was the furthest departure and the most gratifying experience as an actor to date.
Wow. Okay, so now you got me excited.
And it is 100% a testament to Nick Cassavetes.
Wow.
I'd gotten the script, I didn't love it. I got a call from the producer, Jen Gibgot, who is incredible. She said, don't read it. Don't read it. I have another draft coming. We have a director. He's been working on it. I'm not supposed to tell you this. It's Nick Cassavetes. And I said, holy shit. Okay. Like a Grail filmmaker I've always wanted to work with. And sent it to me. I Zoomed with him. I was doing a movie in Vancouver. And he said, hey man, look, I think you're a pretty talented kid. Probably pretty overlooked. We can talk about the script or we can just talk about life. And I don't need a lot. I think you're a cool dude and I would love to do this movie with you, but I want to get to know you. And we talked for 2 hours and I felt like I'd known him in a past life. And I was like, I wrapped this film and you guys start production in Bulgaria less than a week later. I'm in. And he said, let's make a movie, dude. And it was very interesting. And, this film and the way that he wrote it, it's very personal to him. It's sort of a love letter to John. And it's a version of, I'm playing a version of Nick, young Nick.
Oh, wow.
In a parallel universe.
Wow.
And it was his way of giving that kind of to John. And I ended up helping cut the film. I've, been super, super involved with that project, but, and I'll show you the teaser. I have a shitty, video of it, but it's a story about a kid who he told himself he'd never be happy again. And it's about rediscovering happipiness. And it's raw and it's not YA. It's the book initially was. It's heartbreaking and heart fulfilling. And it was such a different experience in Outer Banks. It was Nick wanted it word perfect. Nick wanted it with this cadence. Nick wanted it with all these things. And then he would let me go. And then he would let me be free. And then he wouldn't. And it was what made me realign myself after doing Outer Banks for 5 years and doing the same character to get out of it and to work with somebody like Cassavetes. It made me fall in love with filmmaking again.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you have to come back on when that comes out, man.
Yes.
Because it sounds like we need to really talk about this one.
Yeah.
And that you did a good job of making me super excited about this thing.
Nick actually gave me the best advice. Nick gave me. He said, to be a good actor, you have to be able to act, do ADR, and promote a project. and I keep that in my wallet. It is the truth of it. But I think the way that he shoots, his freedom, his trust in his DP and his crew. It was such a different experience in Outer Banks. And I think that's the beauty of filmmaking, right? You get all of these different, experiences, which then crafts you as a filmmaker.
Right.
And it was just really special. And it was a great cast. And, he ended up rewriting the script and doing it his own way a little bit, and still honoring the book, obviously. But, it made me excited to do movies.
Yeah. That's huge.
And so I'm really excited about this one. And it's just fun to do the different departures from what you're doing.
Yes.
6 to 8 months out of the year.
For sure. Well, we're excited about that. I'm excited about you. I'm a fan
Thanks,
now.
man.
You have to
Thank
come
you.
back on this show.
Let's do it.
Chase Stokes, thank you so much.
Thank you, my friend.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.